Hey everybody, welcome back to We Are the Batman. My name is Mike.
And this is Matthew.
And it's a little bit of an awkward episode this week. We are discussing on this episode the recent passing of comic book writer Alan Grant. And we're discussing this for two reasons. One, because he was such an integral part in the Batman mythos, but also, full disclosure, if you listened to last week's show, we were actually reviewing his Shadow of the Bat storyline, The Last Arkham, completely unaware that he had passed away the night before. It had been announced the day that we recorded, because we recorded this a day later than we usually do anyway.
Correct.
And, you know, we were talking about the comic and how much we loved it and talking about just how good Alan Grant and Norm Brayfogle did on this particular comic. And it wasn't until long after we had recorded and edited and uploaded the episode that Matt reached out to me and was like, dude, Alan Grant died.
Yeah, it was a weird kind of, I saw it on Twitter. Somebody had posted something about this cover about, this resonates different now. And I was like, what do you mean? You know, like, what does he talk about? So I typed in Alan Grant and it was like, you know, Alan Grant dies. It's like, oh my gosh, no.
Yeah. It's rough. It's such a rough thing to hear when, again, we had just talked about it. And it's like, I wish, it's an awful thing to say, but like, I wish we had a chance to kind of dedicate last week's episode to him in the conversation. Obviously, I'm not going to sit here and be like, why didn't he die sooner? Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. And obviously it breaks my heart to hear that he did pass away at the age of 73. So not incredibly old. I mean, he definitely still had some life left to live. So we figured this week we would take some time and talk about Alan's contributions to the world of Batman and comic books in general, because Alan Grant created some damn iconic Batman villains in particular.
Correct. Jeremy Arkham from The Last Arkham, Mr. Zaz, I can never remember how to say his name. Amygdalia?
You know what? I don't know. I'm not even going to try. Amygdala.
There you go.
Yeah. But as well as they also created, he created, along with him and Norm Brayfogle worked together all the time. And the two of them together created Anarchy. Mm-hmm. They created Victor Zsasz. They created Ventriloquist. They created Ratcatcher. I feel like there's one more that I am not remembering. But, I mean, just those three alone, plus the ones you mentioned, are such huge names that we know now. We all know who Ventriloquist is, Mr. Scarface. We all know who Victor Zsasz is. We all know who Anarchy is. And it's because of them that they are now the staples in the Batman mythos that they are.
Yeah, it's actually kind of hilarious because I remember Amygdala is the one that makes me laugh. Is that when they kind of rebooted Nightwing, sent him to Bloodhaven, Amygdala lived in the same apartment building as he did.
Is that right?
Yeah. So there's a scene where he comes down the stairs and sees him, and he just like jumps him.
Oh,
and it's like, hey, what are you doing? And he's like, what? He's like, who are you? And he's like, because of course he's Dick Grayson. He's not dressed as Nightwing. He's like, I know who you are. You're this dangerous person. He's like, no, they put something in my brain. I'm fine now. So he's just like this normal dude who works construction, but he's just massive.
Just a dude.
And just lives in the same building as Nightwing. It's just so weird because like every so often he would show up and do things.
Yeah.
Help him just, like moving, or like when there was the big earthquake and things that happened, he was there. But it was just this random, like, okay, I guess that's where that guy went.
It's Amygdala is one of those characters that just kind of like, yeah, they do exist. He's a weird one. Not one that I go back to very often. I'm trying to think. I feel like he was in an episode of Gotham, but I don't remember because Gotham kind of sucked. Yeah, man, Gotham was rough. I think I gave up halfway through the second season, and I think, he was in an episode in the second season
Mm.
And the second season was just terrible. That show had so much promise. I think he showed up in the Arrowverse at one point too, but I think it was after I jumped ship on that as well. But he's one of those just kind of obscure characters who he just kind of exists.
Mm.
He's out there, but obviously, like other ones, Alan Grant created, Zaz and Ventriloquist in particular have seen a lot of different iterations. I think Ventriloquist, thinking back to the Batman the Animated Series, I think the episodes with him were some of my favorite. Well, the episode with him
Yeah.
was one of my favorite episodes. I think that was one of the ones that, like, when I learned how to work the VCR and got a hold of a blank tape, I recorded that one and like watched it constantly.
There's like, I think he's in 2 or 3, because I know there's the one where he's supposed to be cured.
Okay, so when I say Batman the Animated Series, I mean the original run.
Oh, okay. You're not talking about the
not the soft reboot.
Fair enough.
Yeah, no, because he does come back when they do the relaunch or whatever you want, the reboot, whatever you want to call it, with Tim Drake / Jason Todd. And he's like cured. And he's in the Batman a couple of times. Those aren't my favorite takes on him though. I kind of like the more 50s style gangster as opposed to the more modern gangster the Batman did. But now Ventriloquist, that episode in the original Kevin Conroy animated series was one of my favorite episodes.
Yeah. The thing I kind of, there's a couple things I wanted to bring up when it comes to Alan Grant is, you already mentioned he works with Norm Brayfogle a lot, but apparently he also kind of links up with Simon Beasley a lot because they both were on Judge Dredd for a while.
That's right.
And as you go through and look at the stuff he did with Epic Comics, and up until like almost he stopped working, he was still working with Simon Beasley every so often, all through like the 2010s. So
yeah, because Alan Grant, he worked on Judge Dredd when it was part of 2000 AD.
Correct.
Because they spun that off into its own series, didn't they?
Yeah, and then he also did the Lobo miniseries that kind of launched Lobo into superstardom. And even though he kind of co-writes it with Keith Giffen, he's still part of that team. And that little, if you haven't read that original Lobo miniseries,
oh, it's great.
Oh,
it's fantastic.
Yeah,
he's one of the characters where I'm like, and we're going to talk about all the Comic-Con stuff in another episode, but he's one that, like, if they were to actually get their shit together and bring Henry Cavill back for Man of Steel, like a Man of Steel sequel, like I would love to see Lobo live action. Like, yeah. I know that like that Krypton show did some version of it. I haven't seen that show. But I'd love to see like a Snyder-esque take on Lobo versus Henry Cavill Superman.
It would be interesting. The other series that Alan Grant did that I remember I bought, it was one of those, this is the mid 90s, early 90s, and like indie comics, there wasn't a lot. There was Epic. This is I think this may be around the time the Image hits, but there wasn't a lot. And it was this
Dark Horse around at this point?
Dark Horse is around at this point, but they're not doing superhero stuff yet.
Okay.
But it's this series called The Last American. It is this crazy, weird, like Omega Man kind of thing, where this soldier is put to sleep and he wakes up and it's post-apocalyptic. Like it's 20 years after the nuclear, World War III's happened, nuclear fallout. And it's kind of interesting to think about, like, I think of that show Final Space, and they must have watched this because this character, Ulysses S. Pilgrim, he has like a little robot that's supposed to keep his sanity, but it's him just kind of wandering this post-apocalyptic world trying to find life. And him putting together like what actually happened, what is going on? Why am I the only person? Did they put me under knowing that I would survive this? And it's just this weird kind of story that just it's almost depresses you because of how lonely this dude is, but you also have these weird moments where he like finds an orphanage and a journal in this orphanage and starts reading about this young girl who was pregnant, but there's no sign of where they went. So he trying to figure out what could have happened to them by reading her journal and taking it with it. It's just this weird story, but the art on it is just some of the weirdest art I've ever seen. It's got this guy named Mike McMahon. If you get a chance, check it out, dude. It's just this wacky, weird, just off kilter story that I don't know why it's always stuck in my head. It just kind of captured me. And it probably didn't help that I read the entire thing when I was by myself at my house for a weekend. But
uh,
but yeah, you should check it out. It's really good.
well, something else I wanted to bring up that Alan Grant helped work on was a particular story arc I collected almost every issue of. This was coming out when I was a kid, and this is when I was first really collecting comics. When this was 90, so it was 98, so I was 9. But the Batman Cataclysm story arc that came out for like 3 months in 98, which was one of the coolest like bat family crossover story arcs, where basically there's just this massive earthquake that just hits Gotham City, and even like starts to affect like Bloodhaven even too. And so there's the Batman Cataclysm, but there's also there's a Nightwing Cataclysm, which is basically just everything from Nightwing's perspective. Like it's like Batman goes missing during part of it, and the Oracle loses connection to the Batcave. It's this whole thing, and Huntress gets involved. There's all kinds of craziness going on. Robin's trying to figure out what the hell to do. But Alan Grant worked on that there was a whole team of people who worked on Cataclysm. It was like a whole team of people who worked on that, along with I think Dixon, what's his first name? Chuck Dixon worked on that one. I forget who else worked on that. It was a whole bunch of people, but yeah. And actually Scarface is involved in that one. The ventriloquist is involved in that one. Ratcatcher's involved. So like stuff that he created, they brought him on to be a contributing writer for, because again, this is during this time period. And we talked about this before we started. This was during this time period where Alan Grant and Norm Brayfogle were working on like 8 different titles at the same time.
Yeah, they're all over Batman. It's all Batman. He really is the guy who brings, him and Norm are the guys who kind of bring Batman in and through a majority of the 90s with some amazing storytelling.
Including Batman versus Judge Dredd. So it was 2 characters that he worked on. He got to write some stories for with them together at the same time that he was working on just the Batman issues. He was also working on, I'm looking at his bibliography here so I get it all right. He was also working on Catwoman, Batman Phantom Stranger, Anarchy, Superman versus the Terminator, which was weird. That happened, kids. There was all these Batman DC titles they were working on together. Same with Norm Brayfogle, who was working on Batman Holy Terror and Shadow of the Bat, and they were working on the original Flashpoint together. They were working on all these things together. They were working on so many different things in the 90s. I mean, these guys were part of that kind of, I don't want to say like golden age, because that means something totally different now with comics, but during that kind of high point where there were all these writers and artists were just cranking stuff out.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. But, it is insane. The fact that, after the 90s, you barely get artists to stay on a series for more than 6 issues. Yeah. And these guys are doing multiple series, multiple issues.
Yeah.
But and I also, go ahead.
I was going to say, just he worked on other stuff too, not just in DC. Like he worked on some of the Doctor Who comics in the 80s. He worked on the Bogeyman. He worked on stuff for Eagle Comics, and he did a lot of stuff for 2000 AD. Like not just Judge Dredd. He wrote a ton of Judge Dredd, but like Tharg the Mighty, Robo Hunter, Time Twisters. I mean, this guy worked on a lot of Anderson's side of Vision. Holy crap. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah. I did want to mention, in doing research, and I have to take kind of onus on this myself, is that I did find out Norm Brayfogle had passed as well. He's passed about 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's interesting and unfortunate, and we'll get better about it next time.
Yeah,
But
it's a complete oversight on our part. We were up against the clock because we missed our usual. We usually record Wednesdays in the early afternoon. We both got busy, and then gearing up for Comic-Con coverage and everything else going on last week, and it just completely missed us.
So that's I'll take more onus than you, because I'm usually pretty good about research. But yeah, it was interesting, because I remember as I was suggesting this to you, I thought to myself, like, that dude dropped off. I don't remember seeing him in a while. And apparently 2014, he suffered a stroke, lost the use of his hand, his drawing hand, and never came back in the drawing comics. But yeah, it's just an amazing legacy these two guys bring behind. Like I said, a few moments ago, I mean, they do carry Batman through the 90s. And a lot of what we see now, and just kind of like we said with the last Arkham, like a lot of what we see and what they're doing with the Batman is these guys' work.
Yeah.
And I think, that's an amazing legacy for both men, outside of, all the other things that they did. So I'm glad we really took the time to talk about Alan Grant and kind of mention Norm in this episode.
Yeah, it was great. And last week, getting to talk about just how good Batman the Last Arkham was, and to me, like, there is no greater example of just how good their team up, their work together was than in the Last Arkham, or I mean, honestly, anything that these guys worked on together. I mean, Batman Shadow of the Bat in general is one of the best best runs of Batman, like, that you could ever read. And that took up for, I mean, that was, Shadow of the Bat ran from like 92 all the way to the 2000s. So like, I mean, that speaks, usually you don't see a run go for quite that long. And Shadow of the Bat, if you're ever going to read, if you're looking for a place to start with Batman, Shadow of the Bat, I think is the place to go, because that's where you're going to get most of what you think of when you think of Batman.
Definitely.
So let us know what you guys, think of Alan Grant's work. Are you familiar with it? Is this the first you're really hearing about it? What's some of your favorite stuff? We'd love to hear from you. You can hit us up on Twitter and let us know there. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Mike Shea.
And you can find me on Twitter at Mr. J Ninja. And I'm really curious, has anybody out there ever read The Last American?
I'm gonna bet we're not gonna get as many yeses to that, but I am always open to being surprised. So let us know, and we will see you guys again on the next episode of We Are the Batman. Same bat time, same bat podcast channel.
See you later.